Well, welcome to Coffee and a Mic, presented by our sponsors, SRP. They help us afford all of the production costs. And, of course, Sidewalk Coffee and Bagels. So if you like the coffees and bagels over there, be sure and visit Azaday over at Sidewalk Cafe. Today we're joined by Mayor Julia Wheatley. Thank you so much for being here, Mayor. This is your second time here as mayor. We got you last year. You were like 2 weeks on the job.
Yeah.
So here we are a full year later. I can only imagine, from the outside, it's been a wild ride. I can only imagine what it's been like for you. So what do you think? How did that first year go?
It's incredible. I've been reflecting a lot. Like you said, I think I was like 2 days on the job when we did this last year. And so it was a big deal for me, and realizing over the last year everything that just gets thrown at you, really. It's like this is fun. This is fun. But no, just a lot of engagement with the community, which is incredible. We have such an engaged community, and I love that. Just very active, wanting to know what's going on, and we have so much going on in Queen Creek. It's growth is a beautiful thing. I look at communities across the country that are depopulating, and what that looks like to those communities, and their infrastructure is crumbling and deteriorating, and with growth, it has its own set of issues, right?
Different problems, right?
And that's been really the theme of council. I've been on council for I think it's been 13 years now, 1 year as mayor, and that's really been the theme across that time frame, is just managing growth and making sure that we can still deliver high quality services, programming to our residents, and keep that small town feel amidst all the growth. So it has been a wild ride. I grew up in Gilbert, and so I have a lot of love for Gilbert, but I never knew I could love a community as much as I love Queen Creek. And I'm so proud of the strides. I was in a regional meeting yesterday, and we're talking with, mayors from all over the state, and CEOs and CFOs from all these major companies, and Queen Creek was the only municipality that they mentioned over and over with all the things that we're doing here and how strategic we're being in a lot of different areas. And so it gives me a lot of pride with the council and the team we have at the staff, and just everything that we have going on. So.
Right, we have gotten a lot of national attention. At one point, being the fastest growing community in the nation, and then we hit a little road bump just 6 months ago. Apparently, the governor thinks that we don't have any water. Buckeye and Queen Creek, we're out of water, so we should all pack up and, I guess, sell our homes. I don't know. My tap still works. I don't know about anybody else's, but what was that about? And what's really happening? So
that was very, very interesting, right? So you see those headlines, and those were, like you said, they were national headlines. So it was really incredible to, and that was my first introduction with a lot of media, because they want this story. And so it was incredible to flip the story on them and say, hey, we know we live in a desert. We've been planning for this. We've been preparing for this. We've been very strategic, and we've been doing that for years, and making those investments in water. One of the things they mentioned yesterday that no other municipality has been able to do, but we've acquired water rights. We've purchased fourth priority water rights off of the Colorado River, and that is to the tune of 2,000 acre feet of water. And we've already been delivered that. In April of 24, we will be receiving 5,000 acre feet of water from Harquahala, and excuse me, but as well as, so that's water that we're receiving into our community. The Bartlett Dam is a great opportunity to work with other municipalities across the state, and that will allow us to capture and retain more water, and that is to the tune of 15,000 acre feet of water. And so just all of these different strategic things, and again, we've been doing this for years because it hasn't, being the first municipality, we had to pave the road. We had to figure it out, and we have an incredible water team at the town. And so we have, I want to assure everyone, we have our assured 100-year water supply. All of our residents, all the homes under construction, plus 10,000 platted lots that we have here in Queen Creek. So it's not the doom and gloom story that the headlines wanted to talk about, or what kind of set everyone into a frenzy, but it did give us the opportunity to say, hey, this is what we've been working on, and while the rest of the world hasn't really cared to notice, now they're noticing.
Yeah, you made an interesting point. So one of the reporters from Washington Post had called me, and he was just beside himself that we were running out of water, and we weren't, shouldn't we be in a panic?
Yeah.
I'm like, if you get off the plane and don't realize you're in a desert, I think you have bigger issues. So
Yeah.
we've been planning for 40 years. We have one of the best water
Right.
policies in the nation.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we know that we're in a desert.
Right.
And another point that you made, we have 10,000 plotted pieces of land already that have their water rights. So
Right.
it's a long time before we have any issues with that. And the Bartlett Dam will be online by that point.
Yeah. In 100 years, that's not the same across the state or across the country, excuse me. I'll get it one of these. But 100-year assured water supply that's not the
norm.
The norm across the country. And so that is to speak to what we've been doing as a state. When that development comes in, we want to make sure that we're not just looking 5 years down the road, we're looking at considerable ways down the road.
And we recently had SRP training on that because we get most of our water from our groundwater and then from our SRP reservoirs. And talking about the large developments. So when the large developments come in, those are ticked off against the amount of water that you have. So those are already accounted for as well, too, right?
Right. And another thing that's really interesting to recognize as well, agriculture takes a lot of water, and so we actually use less water today than we did in 1957. But we're doing things as a community as well for the conservation, which you'll see a lot of lake communities now. What we want to do is make sure we're reducing our reliance on groundwater pumping. And so you'll see these lakes that they'll use for reclaimed water, for landscaping, for all of these different types of things. So the private market actually takes care of quite a bit. There's not a home builder in Queen Creek that offers a grass package anymore. So the market has really seen that and adjusted what they provide to consumers. So not only are we acquiring new water sources, capturing more water with the Bartlett Dam, but conservation is a huge issue and something that's always top of mind as well. It is a finite resource, and so just making sure that that's top of mind, so important.
Right. Excuse me.
We're both fighting
We're both there. And the Bartlett, for context and background, we're working with other municipalities and the federal government and Salt River Project to make sure that the Bartlett Dam is extended upwards. So that will hold more water, and that more water will supply the municipalities across the valley.
Yes. Yeah.
Good. So turning from water, which we seem to have plenty of, to money, you guys on council have always done a really good job in Queen Creek. We have a very conservative budget, and I think it was when you were on council maybe 2 years ago, you fully funded our pension obligations. We fully fund our rainy day fund. So just a really good budget all the way around. But this year, for the first time in a long time, we expect the state to have a $400 million shortfall. Next year, depending on who you talk to, can be anywhere from 400 million to $1 billion. And so how is that going to affect the municipal budget, and what are some of those headwinds like?
You know what's tough? Something that we're fighting right now is, and I think we're going to talk about it later, but in our last state budget, there was an appropriation for $87.5 million for our State Route 24. State Route 24 is something we've been working on an incredibly long time. And we kept saying, okay, it's coming, it's coming. It finally came. It's fantastic for our community. You look at, we have, let's see, Queen Creek has almost 77,000 residents. Santan Valley has anywhere from 110, maybe even 130. So pretty close to 200,000 residents in this region. So we have 4 access points to a freeway. You go over to Gilbert Chandler, just a little bit west of us, and look at a 200,000 radius of people that live there. They have 10 access points. So just to put that into perspective of what we're fighting here. So 10 access to 4, and mind you, you all know we just got 3 of those within the last year and a half. So the $87.5 million, that would expand State Route 24, do a full interchange at Ironwood. So important, especially for public safety, the amount of just accidents we see over there. We've been working a long time with our legislators. It was part of the negotiations of the state budget this year, and the governor clawed that back. And it's really, really frustrating. And sent multiple letters, had regional players join on letters, no response. And so I understand that they have a shortfall, but it's also money that has been committed to Queen Creek and that we've fought very hard for, that's been negotiated. And so that's one of the things that's incredibly frustrating for me, because our residents know transportation is lifeline for industry, especially because the State Route 24 goes right next to our $5.5 billion investment. It's state trust land. State trust land benefits the state. It goes directly to K-12 education. That's a big thing for our governor. And so there needs to be the recognition, the correlation that these go hand in hand. This company making a $5.5 billion investment, not only in Queen Creek, but in the state, is considerable. And they're counting on transportation infrastructure being in place. We're getting a lot of interest from vendors and suppliers for LG that want to co-locate there. They're going to need transportation. They're going to need a robust freeway system. And so it all plays into each other. So that's something, again, you pointed out, we save 25% of everything that we bring in. We fund our pension. Other municipalities across the country will literally go bankrupt over their pension system. That's one thing that we've made a priority. It's not something that people talk about a lot. It's not
right. It's
something
not terribly
when you,
interesting.
No,
right?
no. It's not the buzzwords, right? And so, but it's something we're doing that's strategic, that sets us up for these other things, so we can invest $50 million in acquiring water. Those are things that we can do because we've made those key important financial decisions all the way along. Even though there's other things that would be fun to put that money into, we've been strategic and financially sound in those decisions. Another thing, from a state, they're always looking at, one of the things that they just passed was residential tax was something that they...
The rental tax.
The rental tax, yeah, was something that they eliminated. So for Queen Creek, that will be a full impact of $1.2 million to our budget. The thing that's frustrating with that is it doesn't guarantee that those savings will be passed on to that renter.
Consumer.
Yeah. And so that's what's a bit frustrating is the way we are seeing rents go up and things like that. Just because those rental taxes are not being collected doesn't necessarily mean that that is a direct savings to that consumer or the renter. And it's a little difficult, actually, it's a lot difficult from a municipality standpoint. I like to relate things to a individual or a family budget, where let's say, you work full-time and a part-time job, and your spouse works a part-time job, and you're making good financial decisions, you're getting further ahead, and you're like, okay, I think I can quit my part-time job. I think we're doing good. I can quit my part-time job. You quit your part-time job, and then your wife gets laid off from her part-time job. So now you're down to one income. So sometimes it feels like that's the case at a state level, where we've made the commitment to freeze our property taxes. So your property taxes will not continue to increase, even though we're seeing wild home appreciation over the last several years. We've frozen our property taxes so that we can pass those savings on to our residents. And so that's what's tough is we're doing good things to pass on savings to our residents, doing more with less. So then when the state comes in and says, oh, you don't get that either, it's like, okay, well, we plan ahead, and so it won't impact that rental tax. It won't impact our budget as far as programs and services. But it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, state, let us determine what is best for our community, and we will cut back on taxes when we can as a growing community, and we're doing it already with property taxes. It's just difficult when they step in and say, okay, you don't get to collect that tax now either. When we're strategically planning to reduce taxes, we just have to look at our projections and make sure we're doing it in the right timing.
So as they pull back money or opportunities for different taxes, you have this conservative budget. So with the shortfall on top of those types of headwinds, do you anticipate having to cut services or people or things like we did back in the Great Recession?
And I'm glad you brought that up. So for the rental sales tax, it's a $1.2 million hit to us. So it's not a huge amount. So I'm glad you asked that, because it won't impact services or programming or anything like that. Nothing like what we faced during the downturn in
2008.
Yeah. And when I came in 2010 is when, because with government the impacts lag a little bit, is when it really impacted the community and we had to make those cuts. So this is a small cut, but it just speaks to, we're trying to do what we can to pass on savings to our residents, and then we get hit with, okay, well now you don't get to, you don't have this funding source either.
Right. They do that under the name of affordable housing. So that's quite a buzzword. And trying to make housing affordable. So if they take off the rental tax, then of course everybody will have an extra $100 to spend, except maybe rent stays the same and the landlord has the extra $100.
Right.
We don't know. But along those lines now, they're bringing back yet again another effort to try and do away with local zoning. Under the idea that it takes too long to get through the municipal process. So the longer it takes for a housing project to come online, the more it costs the developer, and that's what's causing us to not have affordable housing. And if you want to have design standards that require four-sided architecture, or I always talk about our block walls have to have three elements plus move back and forth on the property line. They want to do away with all of those to make a house maybe $2,000 or $3,000 less expensive. Is that the way it will work? Do we want apartments? Because the other key to that is you can build apartments anywhere that there's residential zoning. The municipality won't have any say in that.
So zoning is a big, it's big for municipalities, and it impacts all of us where you live, right? And so with that, does it take too long? One of the things I'm very proud of Queen Creek is we have great working relationships with our development community. We've worked really hard on that, really, really hard. And we do, and that's another area when I go down and I meet with our legislators and we talk about these bills and they're like, Queen Creek isn't an issue. Queen Creek is doing it right. And it's like, okay, but you have to recognize we're doing it right for a reason, and these bills penalize us. To what you're saying, design standards. Design standards are huge. I can look, my husband works in real estate. I do mortgages professionally. And so looking at real estate all the time, I can spot instantly if a house is in Queen Creek or outside of Queen Creek, just looking at the front of the house, because our design standards are higher. And it speaks to the appreciation that we've seen within our home values. And so design standards are important. It allows us to be different, allows us to be unique, allows us to have more of a rural, the agriculture. That was one that we were facing last year that we were talking about was minimum lot sizes. They were reducing minimum lot sizes, so I haven't seen that recently. But just recognizing that every municipality is unique, and we want to be able to continue to have our agriculture, our rural, equestrian lifestyles out here, and just working with the development community. We have online and digital permitting and reviews, and there's some municipalities that don't. You still have to physically walk in and bring your giant rolls of, and that's just the way they do it. We have a lot of things we've taken off going all the way through to a council meeting or a planning and zoning meeting that can just be an administrative approval. And so to be able to get it administratively approved versus waiting for a planning and zoning commission meeting and then a town council meeting, and it's time, and we know that time is money for developers, and there's certain things that our staff, we have a highly capable staff, that they should be able to approve on their own. We also do things, something that I actually really love, we have at-risk permitting, and so when there's a company that wants to come in and build and develop, they can go ahead at risk even with the permit pending, and it just allows them to never stop and never slow down, because we know those carrying costs are huge, and it's expensive. I do have one statistic I'm very proud of. 99% of the thousands of applications we get every year are completed on or before our review timelines. So that's considerable. And we're constantly hiring staff, trying to keep up with the demands, but and those applicants can meet with our staff within the week. So it just speaks to, we're open for development, we're gonna help you do it faster, cut the bureaucracy, but we still wanna have standards. We still wanna be different.
Product.
We want quality, thank you. And so don't penalize the communities that are doing it right. Use them as the example.
And I think that goes to everybody's property values, but also the location of businesses. When businesses come to locate here, they look and they see the quality of the developments, they see the lifestyle, and they want to be here. So really important that we maintain that.
Well, and with that, these bills that are being proposed, they have a lot greater impact on Queen Creek. Queen Creek's only 50% built out. So when you're looking at a Tempe or a Chandler or a Gilbert, they're primarily built out. So these changes that they're making are really affecting the communities like the Surprise and the Queen Creeks. And it's a lot more impactful. And ultimately, to the point of the affordable housing, we know that it's land costs. It's market costs that are driving it up. And so these types of things, like you said, the $3,000, like ultimately, we're in a different market. And the land here it's not
expensive.
Yeah.
Again, because of the success of the community, our land costs are higher. If you have to pay $300,000 for an acre, your project's going to cost a certain amount of money, and you're not gonna get that affordable piece. But one of the things that they go to then is density. And so one of the things that I think is most disturbing about some of the bills that keep coming back around, they haven't dropped yet, so these aren't there yet, but they're talking about them and they should be hitting the floor here pretty soon, is that if something is already zoned residential, Creek, we tend to build our housing in phases, phase 1, phase 2. So phase 1 could be all single family residents, but phase 2 then could become apartments. And not just apartments, but apartments of any height. And we would have no say over that as a municipality. Is that something that's on your radar? And what does the council think about multifamily?
It is definitely on my radar because our community has said loud and clear, they're not fans of multifamily. However, there is a time and a place for multifamily. And so it is difficult because, and it goes in cycles where, I mean, a few short years ago, no one was building multifamily. There was very few applications for it. Now we're like inundated with it. And to that point, multifamily should not be automatically granted in any neighborhood or single family zoned area. It just shouldn't. It needs to go in the right place. And so, and multifamily is an important component of a community. And it makes sense in certain places. It makes sense, we talked about our state trust land. It makes sense to have multifamily in our state trust land. The amount of employment that's coming in there, the amount of jobs, it makes sense there. In downtowns, to have a truly vibrant, livable, walkable downtown, you need density. And that's the hard thing. That's the hard thing to convey to residents, that to have that downtown that people point to, I like this one, I like this one, I like this one. People live downtown. There's a much higher density. And so that's hard to balance, right? But mixed use development, just the live, work, play type of lifestyle, it's important for that. But it should not automatically be granted by right in any residentially zoned area. And so that's what we're trying to tell all these applicants that come forward. It needs to be in the right place.
And we have our general plan, which spells out most of that multifamily will go with our commercial areas, and particularly our town center, so that we can get that downtown.
Yeah.
And a lot of these bills would just do away with our general plan altogether.
And that's what's frustrating. And it's a voter-approved general plan, so it goes before our residents to vote on it. And it's always passed very highly. And so it just eliminates that. It throws it out the window, that this carefully, strategically planned community is now at the hands of our state legislators saying, you can put multifamily, to your point, any story, any level, anywhere you want. And what I'm hearing from my residents is that is not what we want. And so that's the good fight we have. I mean, that was a huge, when we talk about zoning, I remember, being in this last year talking about the zoning, and it was, I mean, they're all impactful to Queen Creek, again, being only 50% built out, but that one was incredibly impactful. And we just have to keep getting in front of our legislators and saying, this is what it does to a community like Queen Creek.
You mentioned the state trust land a couple of times now, and LG, and LG decided to go ahead and build out the entirety of their project, or the bulk of their project, which is now a $5 billion investment. And so it's going to have a huge impact on Queen Creek. That's how we get those jobs that are high paying. We don't have to travel out of the area. Our access points aren't quite as important. But what else does that mean for the town? And what comes along as a result of that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm most excited about for LG is the amount of jobs that it's bringing. So probably the biggest thing that people like to complain about is the traffic, right? And so, and you look at not only is it Queen Creek's traffic, but all the commute traffic from other jurisdictions around Queen Creek. And so I know Queen Creek, I know Santan Valley, our daily commute is huge. I think Santan Valley, it's like 85% of Santan Valley commutes to work, right? And so what that does is that creates demands on our transportation. So to be able to bring jobs to residents, that cuts down on them having to commute to Tempe and to Phoenix and to Chandler, wherever they commute, to be able to actually have it in our community is huge. But LG adds a lot to the community as well. They increase our tax base. Bringing in those jobs brings in additional, whether it's shopping and dining for those employees that now work there in that area. That brings in additional sales tax to our community to put back towards roads and water and all of the things. And so it's just it's a huge win for Queen Creek on so many levels.
Are there others lined up?
So we are getting a lot of interest. Obviously, LG is a South Korean company, and so it's opened us up into international discussions with companies. And so we have had a lot of interest, and we'll continue to see a lot of interest. It's a great area. That was something strategically we worked really hard on being positioned to be able to annex that land over a decade ago, 12 years ago. And so what that brings to our community, we're making a lot of infrastructure improvements, roadways, water, wastewater in that area. So it also brings those infrastructure improvements to the community.
And once those are in place, then it makes it so much easier for the next company to come.
Absolutely.
So this is sort of the first domino.
It is, but to speak to the $87.5 million, it's huge for us for State Route 24. Not only for our residents in the demand that transportation is for them, but for these big investments and these big companies coming to Queen Creek.
That's a good point. So whenever I'm talking about State Route 24, particularly to our legislators, they'll say, "Well, it's you got the freeway out there now," and I make sure that I correct them and say it's a parkway. It is not a freeway.
Four-way stops. They don't get it.
Right.
I'm like, come out and drive it. They think it's State Route 24. They think it's a freeway. It is literally four-way stops.
It is a parkway with some limited access and already over capacity. So really important that we get that before they continue building the 303 and all of the west side connectors, which are important for our trucking business. But we have these investments coming out here, as well as the I've heard it's as much as 15 million square feet right there in Mesa. It's in Mesa, but it might as well be on Queen Creek.
Right.
So just north of us. And so all of these things build on themselves. Those daytime jobs is how we get the high-end restaurants that everybody wants, the steakhouses and things like that. And then the ancillary jobs that come from those are just amazing too. So all of the additional delivery jobs and trucking jobs and construction alone, $5.5 billion. It's amazing. So did those people just call up the mayor's office and say, hey, we're bringing this factory?
You know, I talk to people in South Korea all the time. No, that's not how it works. The ACA was instrumental in...
The Arizona Commerce Authority?
Yes, thank you. Acronyms are our world in government. But they were instrumental in bringing that lead. We worked with Greater Phoenix Economic Council. We have an incredible economic development team here in the town. It's in Pinal County, so working with our partners in Pinal County. So this took a lot of nurturing, a lot of negotiations, a lot of nurturing, a lot of key players on so many levels to bring something of this magnitude, not only to Queen Creek, but to the state. This is a huge win for the state. So it's incredible that it's in our community.
Right. It's right there with the TSMC project
Absolutely.
Up in Phoenix. It's going to be one of the largest construction projects in the nation. And it's right here in our backyard. And sometimes that's hard to put the scale to. But when those companies go to locate, they pick out an area of the country that might have its list of requirements that it needs. And then they go to places like the Arizona Commerce Authority or the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, and then those help narrow it down to which part of the valley.
Right.
So the Arizona Commerce Authority is probably who kicked off the LG project. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And so really important right now, there's quite a bit of talk about defunding them or doing away with them, or companies will just come anyway. And that's not really the way that it works, is it?
Yeah, it's difficult. We do have a great business environment in Arizona, but when you look at other states that have these super competitive programs, and like I had someone send me an email, and it was about the city of Carmel, California, and how they've been able to build, and what a great example they were. But the whole thing was on a TIF, tax increment financing. And that was what the whole video was about, and how they were able to build this incredible community, and they've used a TIF 60 times. We don't have the ability to use a TIF in here. It's not, Arizona does not allow it. And so that's just one example of, we have very few tools in our tool belt to attract. And I mean, you look at, I was talking to GPEC yesterday, they were talking about one company that went to New York, that they threw this competitive package at them that was wild. Like, you can't turn that down. And so there are very few tools we can use in Arizona. And to that point, so we have to be competitive with what we have, and these organizations that we have that help us bring these lead to us, that nurture that relationship. It's crucial, because we are limited in what we can do. We can't do what Texas does. We can't do what all of these other states do, where they can throw all of these incentive packages at them.
And I think without those lead people out there, you actually are going to be having to sit in your office and call around the world saying, hey, would you like to bring your company here?
Right, exactly. Without those entities in place.
Transportation, you mentioned a couple of times. And so we talked about State Route 24 Parkway.
I'm going to use that.
Right. And we have some of our north-south connectors that are finally going through in Mesa, and will be complete and will attach to the parkway there. But along comes a train project. So it's referred to as Pirate. What can you tell us about Pirate, and how might that affect the area?
You like to get me going right in the morning. Okay, Pirate. So Pirate is a rail extension that will essentially run along Pecos and cut across 6 arterial streets. And again, transportation, the amount of time we spend on our roads is a big deal to our residents. And so this is something, it's being built in Mesa, but it impacts all of Queen Creek, all of Santan Valley. And ever since early on, we've been working really hard for, it recently went before the Arizona Corporation Commission to help them understand the impacts it will have to Queen Creek. We recognize that it is an economic development tool for the city of Mesa to be able to service their industrial lands and potentially even our industrial lands, State Route 24. But it's heavily impactful to our transportation. And I can't remember how many hundreds of millions of dollars we've spent in transportation in the last several years, but it's a lot, and it's always top priority. And so when I think about a railroad crossing 6 streets, specifically Ellsworth Road, it's difficult to stomach. It really is. And I think about, I moved to Queen Creek in '07, and it was before we had
Before the Loop Road.
Yeah, before the Loop Road, before we had the overpass. And I mean, there was, in my mind, in Queen Creek, there's pre-overpass and there's post-overpass. And if you lived here in the pre, you know, I see a lot of heads nodding, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that overpass changed Queen Creek. I can't imagine to this day if we didn't. It would be impossible. And so I think about that again, and having a railroad crossing on Ellsworth Road or the other 5, and it's incredibly frustrating. We worked really, really hard with the ACC to help them recognize the impacts to Queen Creek. They did not see it that way. It is pending review from I wish I had the...
One of the authorities.
Yeah. It's pending review from an additional authority, and we're just waiting. But construction could start as early as the end of this year. So what it will do is it'll have a crossing on our streets. It'll require, I think about all the buses. I mean, we talked to them about so many things, all the buses. So as we know, Queen Creek Unified School District actually has schools in Mesa, in Eastmark. And so you think of the number of buses that go up and down Ellsworth Road servicing those elementary schools, the high school, and they have to stop. They have to stop at those railroads. And you want to talk about a freeway, it's Ellsworth Road.
Right.
Ellsworth Road is the freeway. And so the safety concern alone with having a school bus full of children stopping on Ellsworth Road and people traveling 55, 60 miles an hour
Behind it,
coming to a screeching halt, and it's bus after bus, it's huge safety concern. They didn't see it that way. There is something called a 30 vehicle delay hour that has to be met. We argued that is absolutely met today to warrant a grade separation railroad crossing. So that was our biggest concern, was saying, hey, if this is going to be built, it needs to be separated. It needs to either go over or go under, just like what we have already. And again, that being such a huge investment in and shaped our future for Queen Creek. And so they didn't see that 30 vehicle delay hour was already met, even though statistically and everything, we can prove that we're there. We know, we traverse that every day.
If you've driven it, you know.
You know. And so they didn't feel like it was met. It wasn't warranted on construction. The other thing we tried to argue is just construction alone. So you're building this once at a grade level. So just you're crossing over it, right? And then when that is warranted, which I'm going to argue is tomorrow, right? Then they have to come in and do construction again on Ellsworth Road. And so, so it's tough because, you know, understand the impacts and the need that it services the region, but we also need to understand the impacts it has to the region.
Right. And so important to note that it is good for industrial development.
Yeah.
It could in fact affect our industrial development.
Yes, absolutely.
But if we had gotten the assurances that it would only run midnight to 5 a.m., that would have been ideal.
Yeah.
Or with the at grade the above grade or below grade crossing. But we didn't get any of those.
Yeah.
So it could run at 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
And so that is something we've been working with to say, okay, how many trains? What times of the day? This is when they can run, when it's not peak traffic hours. And so that is something that we can work with them to address, that even though it is going to impact our residents and transportation, let's do it in hours where it's the least impactful. And we just keep drilling down that, hey, we meet that 30 vehicle delay hour. And let's get on construction for the grade separation, whether it's above, below, whatever that looks like. We know what it looks like not having it. We've been there. We've lived
been
there.
I live right next to that. So.
Yep.
And at least at Ellsworth and Meridian, that would be a key.
And I don't want to ignore the impact that it does have with, as far as economic development to Mesa, potentially our lands. But this is, transportation is life. So important.
Well, Mayor, we're just about out of time. So we thank you so much for being here. Anything, last words?
No, I love this position. I get to go out every day and talk about how great Queen Creek is and what we're doing. And so it is fun to talk about things that, again, we've talked about that doesn't sound like super, not that anything you do in government is sexy, but pensions and all, but when you get to tell your story, it's incredible to be able to look back and say, this is what we did. It was difficult at the time, but it was financially prudent. But to be able to tell that story and then live in such a prosperous area with so many businesses wanting to come to Queen Creek and having all of those different amenities. We're seeing a lot of amenities now for young families and our youth to do, which early on in my days on council, trying to get that Harkins was the biggest win.
That was the biggest thing.
Wasn't it really? Yeah. We could probably compare it, Harkins and the overpass for the railroad, big wins. But and so it's really exciting. Having growth is a good thing when you look at the alternative. It really is. It's just, we're constantly trying to manage that growth, provide the services, the same quality level of services that everyone's used to, continue to do that, even though we have a lot more neighbors. And just trying to keep our Queen Creek roots. What keeps Queen Creek unique? We've got so many events at our Horseshoe Park and Equestrian Center. And we have so many, if you haven't been out to the agritainment that we have between Schneff Farms and Olive Mill and Hayden Mills and botanical gardens and all of the things that are, for a small town, that's pretty amazing to have in our small town. So I love the work that we're doing. I love the direction that we're going. I love the people in Queen Creek. It's an incredible community. So it really is, like, I really mean that it's an honor to be the mayor.
Well, thank you so much for your time.